Welcome to Ghosts of the Coast, a Lincoln City haunted tour by me, your ghost host with the most, Sweeney Gray. We begin our tour with the story of the grounds we are standing on right this very moment, the Pines Dines. In 1927, an Art Deco hotel called the Pines was originally constructed on these grounds. The Pines was a place for Oregon's wealthy elite to come and party on the weekends and the holidays, and it was really famous throughout the Pacific Northwest. However, the Pines burned down in the late 1970s. It was rebuilt, and it burned down once again in 2008. Now, this might seem innocent at first whenever you're looking at the story, but once you know a bit more about the area and its history, it becomes perhaps a bit more insidious. This area has been historically a vision quest area for the Siletz Bay tribe, spiritual journey, and to see visions and to seek spiritual answers. Just a little bit up this road, many people don't know, is an ancient indigenous burial ground. And the proximity to the site has led many locals to believe that the place has burned down not out of coincidence, but out of an ancient curse. After the Pines Hotel was burned down, other places have been built here, but so far, no place has lasted. Every single business that has started here has burned down in some type of fire. This is the very first concrete building that has been built in this area. So let's hope that our lovely hosts here at the Pines last a little bit longer than some of the people who resided here beforehand. Now, you can still see traces of the Art Deco hotel and the history of this place when you look at the chandelier inside. That is actually an Art Deco chandelier that they had imported in order to honor the Pines. And the name, the Pines Dines itself, is named after the old hotel that could not withstand the furious ancient spirits that reside here. Next, I want to tell you the story of Bob Everest. Bob Everest was a local fireman who was very dedicated to his job. In 1941, Bob Everest died while out on patrol one evening. He was in his fire truck and he was actually out on a call. Now, they say that Bob still resides here in Lincoln City, and they say that you can still see Bob within his fire truck. This whole area used to be originally old growth forest. So imagine all around you, every way that you could see, Sitka spruces, thousands of years old, hundreds of feet tall, and green, vibrant mosses, owls, and plentiful ecosystems. This creek itself used to be literally filled with salmon. So filled with salmon that you could just see them jumping just from standing on the side of the water. Now, it's a bit of a horror story in itself, but the whole area was deforested by the people who came and colonized the area. And in the midst of that, in the early 1900s, there was a small group of indigenous people right here where we're telling this story. Now, they were out hunting and fishing and just living their lives, you know, taking care of and being part of the land that they had been part of since the beginning of time immemorial. But they had seen white settlers come into the area before. And at this point in time, the white settlers had been moving all their way westward across the country for many years. And so the indigenous people knew well of the white men, and they knew well of what happened to indigenous people whenever they encountered them. Out in the distance, they could see, similar like tonight, one single light out in the distance. Now, whenever they saw the light, they held their breath, and they all felt fear, for they knew that that light had to mean that a ship was coming. However, they felt mostly confident and mostly safe and secure because this is actually a very, very tricky and treacherous sand spit. Waterways that enter the Oregon coast are very, very treacherous, and many, many ships had crashed out in the distance, but none of them had been able to make it in. So they saw the light and they told themselves, it's okay. They probably won't be able to make it in. We'll probably be able to sleep tonight. But many of them just had a gut feeling that there was something different about this ship. So they watched, and none of them could get to sleep as they saw the light getting closer and closer and closer. Now, right around the mouth of the bay, they expected the ship to strike land and to stop, but it didn't. The ship just kept weaving its way through the path, almost like someone was guiding this ship who had been born here, who had known the area and sailed it hundreds of times. It just kept moving. It got closer, and it waved its way all the way through the sandbank until it made it to where the bridge now stands. Now, the indigenous people were terrified. They expected to see people getting out of the boat at any moment, coming out, fishing in their waters, and for a very, very savage and very unfortunate process to begin. So they watched the boat all night long, but nobody left the boat. No white men appeared, and nobody stepped foot on the deck. They could hear no noise. They could see no people. They could only see one light burning inside of the boat. So, by the time the morning had come, they said, certainly, people will start coming out of the boat now. But nothing happened. So by midday, the curiosity got the better of the indigenous people who were watching the boat, and they made their way and boarded the ship. As soon as they got on the ship, they could tell something was really strange. It was ghostly quiet, and not a single trace of a person could be found. It didn't look like an emergency had happened. Nothing was thrown overboard, nothing was toppled, nothing was destroyed. The ship was pristine and clean. Not a speck of blood, not a speck of dust. So, they explored the ship. They went to the galleys and found nothing. They looked all across the entire deck. It was completely empty. It wasn't until they went into the captain's chambers that they found the only trace of humans left on the ship, which was one lamp of oil that was burning still into the day on barely any oil. Now, this story of the ghost schooner is actually part of Lincoln City lore and part of our city's identity, because this creek itself is named Schooner Creek after the ghost schooner. Many people who live in Lincoln City actually do not know that we have our very own cryptid that lives here in town. The most famous cryptid of the state of Oregon is, of course, Sasquatch. Sasquatch is like our state mascot. And I would say the second most famous cryptid is D.B. Cooper. That's a joke. But we have our very own cryptid here in Lincoln City, which is the creature of Devil's Lake. Oh, yeah. And I remind you all that these are all true stories that I'm telling tonight. A group of indigenous people were out fishing on the lake. Now, the chief was leading his people out there when suddenly, the legend goes, the lake started to boil and bubble and churn beneath them. A strange steam started to rise. And as the chief looked over the water, a large tentacle reached out of the water, wrapped itself around him, and pulled him down into the water. Ever since, the indigenous people began to call the lake Devil Lake as a word of warning for anyone who would venture on it. Now, for hundreds of years, the indigenous people would make sacrifices to appease the spirit of the lake. They would throw flowers onto the lake, and they would also offer salmon in honor of the creature. People say that the creature still resides in the lake, bubbling, boiling, and churning where the creature has returned to its normal form. And kayakers still go missing in the lake rather frequently. Now we're going to tell what I think might be one of the absolute creepiest stories that we'll be telling on the whole tour. I think it's one of the most infamous stories in all of Lincoln City history. Does anyone know Dale Omsberg? You might not know his name. You might know what he did. Dale Omsberg was Lincoln City's one and only funeral home director. Dale was known to his friends as a kind-hearted man who had a lot of heart and very little business sense. Dale was really well known for trying to help out the community. He did funerals and he did cremations from his business, which is now an antique store. Dale would tell people, if you can't pay, that's okay. Bring your loved one in, I'll take care of them, we'll bury them now, and you can pay later. He actually became a little bit infamous for this saying, bury now, pay later. But it turns out that the people who brought their loved ones in for burial would pay in a different way than just financially. One day, it was reported by locals that there was a very bad smell coming from the crematorium / the funeral home. This was sort of something well known within the community, the stench that would come from this place. But it became particularly bad in the year of 1985. It was an extremely rainy spring, and the police were called, and they had finally had so many complaints that they could do nothing but finally investigate them. They figured that it would be no big deal. Dale was really well known and respected. When the police arrived at the crematorium, many of them saw things that they say they dream about still. They went downstairs to investigate the smell, and they discovered bodies upon bodies, piled and unembalmed in boxes and plastic bags. The deceased loved ones of the residents of Lincoln City had not been put to rest. They were left to rot in the basement of this place. Dale was taken in. He was given 25 days in jail. People began checking the ashes of their loved ones, only to find out that they had not actually received cremated ashes, but they had received nothing but mere fireplace ashes. In order to get out of jail, Dale was offered immunity from any further jail time or any further prosecution from his crimes if he would tell where the other bodies were. On a rainy night, throughout various cemeteries in the city, Dale showed 11 different graves to the policemen that had been filled with 35 different bodies. The most people that he had put into one grave was 7 people who he had chopped up and put into one single casket. The police chief at the time says that he still has nightmares about this event. The Bijou Theater is an amazing theater. It was originally called the Lake View Theater. It was built in the mid-1930s. Or a ghostly specter in the Bijou Theater that many people have not seen. The theater was originally built with an old organ. The organ was meant to accompany silent films. At night, many of the times the organist will go in and practice long in the after hours. The original organist of the Bijou Theater was really well known for this. He would stay really late at night practicing for his films and practicing for his performances. And when it was still the Lakeview Theater, the owners found the organist dead at the organ. They say that the spirit of the organist still haunts the Bijou to this day. However, he only appears to a very select few people. The organists themselves say that as they practice, they begin to feel like somebody's watching them. They look back and see nothing. But as they continue to play, the feeling grows and increases until when they look backward, the organ faces the screen. So when they look backward, they can actually report seeing a man wearing a vest, a nice pair of slacks, and organ shoes, which are black leather shoes with an extra long heel, walking their way up to the organ. If they turn their back, he approaches closer. And every time they look back, he's closer to them than before. Nobody has ever actually felt the touch of his hand on their shoulder, but people say that he's watching in scrutiny. And the worse you play the organ, the closer he gets.
Hi, I'm Mac Pimentel, and I'm the organist here at the Bijou Theater, and I've been playing here since the year 2000 on 1:30 on Monday and Friday, and that's a half hour before the 2 p.m. matinee. And I try to play older music that people remember in the past. It's somewhat nostalgic to most people. Old tunes like that. I also play some of the later tunes that are related to the movie. Well, I've been playing organ for 70 years.
And how old are you now?
90.
Still going strong. Have you ever seen the ghost that haunts the Bijou?
Sometimes you can hear it when I'm in here practicing. Scary.
Very good.
Sponsored by Pop-Up Treats. Every bite is full of frightful delight.